I'd like to share a few thoughts on having great faith and how to obtain it. Faith is perhaps the single most critical gospel topic that we could discuss because the exercise of faith is how we obtain every other blessing that we can from God. And without a correct understanding of it, it is impossible to please God and to fulfill the purpose of this life. And faith is one of those topics that is spoken about ad nauseum, but is both misunderstood and maligned inside and outside of a religious context. So you often hear atheists, for example, criticize faith as some sort of blind belief, which is incorrect. And you also hear people within Christian churches, for example, saying that faith is to believe in something for which there is no evidence, which is also incorrect and is actually just another way of saying blind faith. So it's super critical that we understand what faith actually is. I have spent a lot of time and study over the past several months thinking about this topic, doing my best to understand it and to be able to speak about it sincerely and put these things into practice so that I can actually have from personal experience something to share with regarding faith. And I have a couple of definitions here. Speaking about giving a good definition of what faith is extremely hard because it is a complex topic. And to succinctly, in a single sentence, describe what faith is very challenging. And so, what I have here is my current best ability at doing so. There are two separate ways I've decided to describe it. The first is in the title. It says, faith is the process of learning and walking the path to obtain your desires. So it's the entire process of having a desire and then learning through investigation and trial and error and walking the path to get that desire until you get it, at which point it turns into knowledge. Like your understanding of the path cements and you know the path to get your desire, and now you have knowledge. The other definition, more generally, is to act to obtain a desire in accordance with what sufficient reason suggests will deliver it. It requires action in alignment with reasons that you have to suggest how you're acting will deliver you what you want. And to do that continuously, changing how you act based on new evidence until you get what you're desiring and against all opposition that might come into your path, that is what faith is. There's a distinction between faith and faith in God. I'll just say faith is a general principle. It does not just apply to things specifically having to do with God. Any desire that you have, you obtain through faith. In the way that I just described. And to have faith in God specifically is when you allow your trust in God and his character and in his word to be the deciding reasons for continuing to act in that path. So when you're looking at the reasons you have to believe what you're doing is what's going to give you what you want, many times you'll have both positive and negative reasons, and you should really only continue in a path if the reasons are net positive. And there are certain desires that we have that we might want from God, for example, where the negative reasons to pursue that path might be astronomically large, but the positive reason is because God told you to, and you trust in his infinite goodness and in his knowledge and regard for you and his desire to benefit you. And because you trust that, no matter how bad it seems on the other end of the scale, you push forward anyway through that belief and move down the path towards getting what you're desiring. The distinction between great faith and just regular faith or lesser faith is in how sufficient the reasons have to be and in the method at which you arrive at them. So, great faith is to act with appropriate intensity when the reasons are minimum sufficient and they are deduced through logic, or a step in them is deduced through logic, what you might call a logical leap. So, what do I mean by minimum sufficient? So, as soon as you have sufficient evidence and not one paper more, one hair more of evidence than is necessary to arrive at the conclusion that moving down a path is the right decision, you move. If you have to keep waiting for the reasons for you to do so to get worse and worse and worse, then that is less and less faith that you're exercising in going for your goal. So, what's an example of this? Um, so, say you are smoking or something, and there is an abundance of evidence in the world that says that that's bad for you. There's lots of clinical data, there's studies, there's commercials, but you've been smoking for a while and you don't notice any physical effects on you that are bad, and you like how it makes you feel. So you already have sufficient reasons to change because of all the data and the experience of other people. So what would be an example of additional evidence? Well, what if you got sick or you got lung cancer or something? And now you have greater reasons to quit smoking, but the blessing that would have been yours from quitting is much less than it otherwise would be. And in that specific example, the blessings of never starting to smoke in the first place are even greater. So there's actually already sufficient reasons to never smoke in the first place. And there are many things like that. You can learn a lot of powerful and important lessons that have a maximum benefit only by learning them through logic and deduced reasoning based off of the experience of other people or off of accounts of other people. And so to act with great faith is to act in accordance with that reasoning without having to suffer negative consequences to give you a reason to do that more. Another key aspect of faith is sometimes we talk about it in terms of belief. Like we say, I have faith in God or I believe in God. But that is commonly understood to mean I believe that something exists or that something is real. So when people say I believe in God, they are saying I believe that God is real. And that is not actual faith. It does not even matter in that case if God is real or not. What matters is how do you act in accordance with that belief. So I have an example here of if you say that you believe in Santa, if you believe in Santa, then you believe that there's a person out there that brings Christmas presents when you're asleep at night, and there's the whole you have to be good during the year and he checks his list twice and all that. So if you said that you believed in Santa but you didn't put up a Christmas tree, were bad the whole year, and you didn't expect him to come or even keep a Christmas tradition, how could you really say that you believe? Like, what does your belief in Santa even mean at that point? It doesn't mean anything. And it's the same thing with God. You can't say that you believe in God and you can't receive the blessings that you would have for believing in God unless you're acting in accordance with that belief, because all things come through faith. So to believe in God means to do what he says. And there's really no way around that. There's no way to obtain the blessings of God without following the requirements of obtaining those blessings, which you could call his commandments, but you could also just call the emulation of his character and the execution of his will. So don't fall into those traps. To have faith is to act according to what you believe for the reasons that you have to do it. Now, in the Book of Mormon, there is a critical character who is identified as a person who has exceeding faith. In fact, the Lord said here of this person we're talking about as the brother of Jared, and the Lord said unto him, because of thy faith, thou hast seen that I shall take upon me flesh and blood, and never has man come before me with such exceeding faith as thou hast. So we have an example of a person who, at least in that given time and in those given circumstances, Lord said, nobody has ever had this kind of faith before. And you see down in verse 15, and the Lord again says, and never have I showed myself unto man whom I have created, for never has man believed in me as thou hast. Seest that ye are created after my own image, yea, even all men were created in the beginning after mine own image. So if belief in God was just a light switch, a toggle on or off, someone couldn't have more of it than someone else. So it's not just on or off. Like many things in the gospel, it's an either or and then by degrees. So you believe in God. How much do you believe in him? Well, how much you believe in him is how much you act in accordance to what you believe, to what he says. And so the question to ask with something like this is, how did the brother of Jared come to have such great faith? And how can you and I have this kind of faith as well? Now, the answer to that question is given in the Book of Mormon as well. And the funny thing is that the statement that's made where the Lord says, never has man come before me with such exceeding faith as thou hast, that comes from Ether chapter 3. And chapter 3 and chapter 4 sort of detail this experience that he has with God. But the key to how he obtained that faith is given throughout chapters 1 and 2. And we almost never talk about those chapters at all. So I invite you to take a minute and go back and, using these definitions, see if you can figure out where and how the brother of Jared increased his faith through what he goes through throughout chapters 1 and 2 of Ether in the Book of Mormon. One important hint is that this is something that anyone can do. Anybody that follows the same pattern as the brother of Jared and exercises the same faith can receive the same blessings. This did not just mean that he wished harder than anybody else, or he thought harder than anybody else, or he wanted it harder or more than anyone else. Although a strong desire is certainly the building block and foundational block of faith. He was not made special by God and then had this vision. He made himself special, so to speak, by the faith that he exercised. So I invite you to take the opportunity to study this topic more, and then I think I'll make a part 2 where I go over chapters 1 and 2 and we talk about what's in them and why those are the keys to his faith growing the way that it did. Take care.